Good morning, everyone. Your morning weather briefing for this July 3rd finds that there are no major changes in the forecast versus what I presented yesterday. Looking at your temperature and rainfall outlooks this morning, I do not see a lot of differences in those outlooks versus what I presented yesterday. 11 to 15-day temperature forecast. In fact, largely a carbon copy of yesterday, still going with the models and their dry look for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15-day time frames. QPF discussion this morning. Weather Prediction Center did not release a composite 5-day map this morning, so that's why I'm showing 1 to 3-day rainfall there on the left and 4 to 5-day rainfall on the right. No disagreements with any of these forecasts. Some good rain is going to be seen mainly in the western and northwestern Corn Belt, also portions of the eastern Corn Belt for the next 3 to 4 days before things dry out for the weekend. Quite a bit of rain along the Gulf Coast, some of that rain falling in every day during the 5-day time frame. Then for the day 6 to 7 period, we are looking at a drier air mass arriving in the Corn Belt for the end of this week and for the weekend, and that will be creating dry conditions across a big portion of the middle of the country during that time frame, and quite possibly even longer than that. Afternoon high temperatures yesterday. Still did see some above normal temperatures yesterday in the eastern Corn Belt with some spotty areas there getting to 90 degrees or a little bit warmer, but a lot of the Corn Belt seeing fairly mild temperatures with regards to daytime highs yesterday. Low temperatures this morning, at least as of 5 o'clock anyway. You can see that there are still a lot of 70 plus degree temperatures as of 5 o'clock this morning in southern, southwestern, and far western portions of the Corn Belt. 18-hour rainfall totals. Most of the rainfall through 1 o'clock this morning was in a scattered nature in southeastern portions of the Corn Belt and areas to the south of there. Also did see some rains in the northern plains. Certainly are seeing a lot more rainfall activity since 1 o'clock this morning in portions of the far northwestern Corn Belt. You can see that on radar estimated rainfall that there has been some very big totals and locally very heavy totals across portions of South Dakota and into southwestern Minnesota. I can find more than 2 inches of rainfall at Marshall, Minnesota, and over 3 inches of rainfall at Redwood Falls as of 5 a.m. Certainly those rains in southwestern Minnesota are coming in an area that just does not need rainfall at this time. A lot of that rainfall is still occurring this morning. Still see extensive rainfall on the radar this morning across a big portion of the northern plains and into the far northwestern Corn Belt. And again, it is southwestern Minnesota that has already seen heavy rain, and they are still seeing more rainfall at the time of this recording. As far as the forecast is concerned, the rainfall that we are seeing in the far northwestern Corn Belt and in the northern plains this morning is via a cool front, and that cool front is going to be stalled on that area for another day or two, but then we'll be starting to move southeastward by the time we get to 1 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. You can see that frontal system has started to push a little bit further southeast into far northwestern portions of the Corn Belt, and then as we get towards 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, you can see that the frontal system in question has moved well to the south of the Corn Belt and is pushing a lot of the rain at that time out of the Corn Belt, with a dry and cool area of high pressure out of Canada starting to dominate Corn Belt weather at that time. Then looking at 6 to 10 day rainfall totals, that area of high pressure that is producing a dry air mass for the weekend and drying things out in the Corn Belt for the weekend is followed by weather models not really all that eager to be producing any additional rainfall even into the 6 to 10 day time frame, which would cover the period from Sunday through next Thursday. Note from the European operational model basically showing nothing at all for the entire Corn Belt during that 6 to 10 day period. Other models are not as dry as that, but you can still see that other models like the GFS operational, GFS ensemble, European ensemble as well, certainly suggesting that large portions of the Corn Belt will get no rainfall, and big portions of the Corn Belt that don't see anything will at least see very little at all. So we are still looking at the weather models pretty insistent on drier weather returning to the Corn Belt for the weekend, and very dry conditions at least into the 6 to 10 day period. Again, I'm not going to be fighting that model forecast right now. The models have been doing a pretty good job, especially during this work week period, in predicting the type of rainfall that will likely be seen. But again, I'll have a little bit more commentary about the longer range rainfall outlook in just a moment later on in this recording. As far as your temperature forecast, we will be seeing a return to above normal temperatures across the entire Corn Belt for the next couple of days. Some areas even a little bit longer than that. Looking at your temperature anomalies for tomorrow, you can see an extensive area of the Corn Belt seeing temperatures easily above normal levels. But again, as we get towards about Friday, we will be seeing some cooler weather moving into a lot of the Corn Belt. And by the time we get to Saturday, you can see that normal to mostly below normal temperature is going to be common across a big portion of the middle of the country at that time, as again a dry and cool Canadian air mass starts to take control. Your dome watch for a Tuesday, you can see that the dome of high pressure as of later on today is starting to expand a little bit further westward, but still mainly over the eastern Corn Belt and areas to the east of there. As we get towards 7 o'clock in the morning then on Thursday, you can see that a dome of high pressure really covering a very big portion of the nation at that time, certainly expanding westward by the time we get to that period. Then as we get towards 7 p.m. In the day on Friday, note that the dome of high pressure is still very impressive, but is continuing to move westward at that time. A northwesterly flow aloft is bringing that cool Canadian high pressure system at the surface down into the Corn Belt at that time. And then as we get towards at 7 o'clock in the evening on July 11th, you can see that the dome of high pressure shrinking somewhat and still moving further southwest, starting to take up its normal summertime position in the southwestern U.S. Near the Four Corners region. And you can see by the time we get to the end of the 11 to 15 day time frame, it has largely become stationary. And again, that is a very typical summertime location as far as a dome of high pressure is concerned for the United States. Now, obviously, that does not mean a lot of cool weather in the forecast. You saw that from the previous slides, and even this slide here, we are looking at least near normal, if not above normal, heights across much of the nation at that time. So certainly not a cool weather pattern, and that's why I still have big portions of the Corn Belt in at least near normal, if not above normal temperatures for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. Again, as always, the question mark is with regards to rainfall. And again, once again, as you can probably anticipate what I'm going to be talking about, is this northwesterly flow aloft. The models themselves are still very, very pessimistic for especially the 6 to 10 day time frame, but certainly into the 11 to 15 day period as well, about a lack of rainfall. They're just not optimistic about rainfall chances at all, and the models are in very good agreement on that point. And again, here this morning, as was the case late last week, I'm not going to argue against the models, and I'm not going to fight the models. At the same time, though, you look at that weather pattern there. It's a northwesterly flow aloft. A lot of times in the summertime, that type of weather pattern turns out to be a lot wetter than the models would anticipate, because the models just cannot see these small embedded upper level features that many times are embedded in that northwesterly flow aloft. And as they move over top of that dome of high pressure in the southwestern United States, you get a ring of fire type activity, and you can get a lot more rain than the models would suggest. Again, I'm not going to fight the models. I'm going for the below normal rainfall, but just still leaving you with the caveat that a lot of times we do see a northwesterly flow pattern like this turn out to be wetter than the models would suggest. Internationally this morning over in Europe, still a pretty dry weather pattern for the next 2 weeks for a lot of Europe. The bulk of the rain that you see there in central and southern portions of France is going to be for today through Thursday. Otherwise, all of Europe looking at quite dry weather for the next 10 days, if not even longer than that. Still looking at below normal rainfall for a lot of the summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union over the next 2 weeks anyway. Very limited rain there for the 1 to 5 day time frame. We'll admit that the 6 to 10 day period has gone a little bit wetter today, but I'm still not real optimistic about anything big, especially in those drier areas in the eastern portion of the summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union. No big heat in the forecast, so do not see anything real worse than normal to slightly above normal temperatures for the next 2 weeks across the area in question. Spring grain areas of Russia, one of the drier forecasts that we've seen in quite some time. You can still see that in western portions of the region, still some nice rain is going to be falling over the next 10 days. Obviously, rainfall not a problem in the spring grain areas right now. Manchurian corn and soybean areas looking at near to below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks, but still some pretty nice rain is going to be falling there for the next 10 days. North China Plain still looking at near to above normal rainfall during the next 2 weeks. Southern portion of the region probably seeing some heavy amounts of rainfall rainfall, and that rainfall there will be getting started tomorrow. Forecast for the Canadian Prairie is not overly wet. I would think that below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks, especially in the southern growing areas. You can see that Alberta into southern Saskatchewan and into southwestern Manitoba being an area that looks especially limited in the way of rainfall there for the next 10 days anyway. In Australia, looking at 24-hour rainfall totals, your eye is immediately drawn to southwestern portion of Australia, where there are wheat areas there saw some very nice rainfall amounts over the last 24 hours. Big portions of that area seeing more than an inch of rain as expected. A little bit more rainfall going to be seen there in the near term, but overall the biggest rains are now behind us for the western portions of the Australian winter wheat area, and they are looking at below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks now. For the eastern growing areas, notice how New South Wales is looking at extremely limited rains for the next 10 days. Any rains that are going to be seen mainly confined to Victoria for late this week. All of the eastern winter wheat areas of Australia then looking at below normal rainfall for the 11 to 15 day time frame. Finishing up this morning with the Indian monsoon. Looks pretty decent for the next 2 weeks in central areas, especially into Maharashtra and to southern portion of Madhya Pradesh. Northern and far southern portions of the Indian subcontinent looking at weaker than normal monsoonal conditions for the next 2 weeks. That's what I have for today. Everyone have themselves a great day.